Part 2 of Roald Dahl's The Magic Finger, illustrated by Quentin and published by Puffin books. In the afternoon of the very same day that I put the magic finger on the Gregg family, Mr. Gregg and Philip and William went out hunting once again. This time they were going after wild ducks. In the first hour they got 10 birds. In the next hour they got another 6. "What a day!" cried Mr. Gregg. "This is the best yet." He was beside himself with joy. Just then 4 more wild ducks flew over their heads. They were flying very low. They were easy to hit. Bang, 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 bang went the guns. The ducks flew on. "We missed," said Mr. Gregg. "That's funny." Then, to everyone's surprise, the 4 ducks turned around and came flying right back to the guns. "Hey!" said Mr. Gregg. "What on earth are they doing? They are really asking for it this time." He shot at them again. So did the boys, and again they all missed. Mr. Gregg got very red in the face. "It's the light," he said. "It's getting too dark to see. Let's go home." So they started for home, carrying with them the 16 birds they had shot before. But the 4 ducks would not leave them alone. They now began flying around and around the hunters as they walked away. Mr. Gregg did not like it one bit. "Be off!" he cried, and he shot at them many more times, but it was no good. He simply could not hit them. All the way home, those 4 ducks flew around in the sky above their heads, and nothing would make them go away. Late that night, after Philip and William had gone to bed, Mr. Gregg went outside to get some wood for the fire. He was crossing the yard when all at once he heard the call of a wild duck in the sky. He stopped and looked up. The night was very still. There was a thin yellow moon over the trees on the hill, and the sky was filled with stars. Then Mr. Gregg heard the noise of wings flying low over his head, and he saw the 4 ducks, dark against the night sky, flying very close together. They were going around and around the house. Mr. Gregg forgot about the firewood and hurried back indoors. He was now quite afraid. He did not like what was going on, but he said nothing about it to Mrs. Gregg. All he said was, "Come on, let's go to bed. I feel tired." So they went to bed and to sleep. When morning came, Mr. Gregg was the first to wake up. He opened his eyes. He was about to pull out a hand for his watch to see the time, but his hand wouldn't come out. "That's funny," he said. "Where's my hand?" He lay still, wondering what was up. Maybe he had hurt the hand in some way. He tried the other hand. That wouldn't come out either. He sat up. Then, for the first time, he saw what he looked like. He gave a yell and jumped out of bed. Mrs. Gregg woke up, and when she saw Mr. Gregg standing there on the floor, she gave a yell too, for he was now a tiny little man. He was maybe as tall as the seat of a chair, but no taller, and where his arms had been, he had a pair of duck's wings instead. But, cried Mrs. Gregg, going purple in the face. "My dear man, what's happened to you?" "What's happened to both of us, you mean?" shouted Mr. Gregg. It was Mrs. Gregg's turn now to jump out of bed. She ran to look at herself in the glass, but she was not tall enough to see in it. She was even smaller than Mr. Gregg, and she too had got wings instead of arms. "Oh!" sobbed Mrs. Gregg. "This is witches' work," cried Mr. Gregg, and both of them started running around the room, flapping their wings. A minute later, Philip and William burst in. The same thing had happened to them. They had wings and no arms, and they were really tiny. They were about as big as a robin. "Mama, Mama, Mama," chirruped Philip. "Look, Mama, we can fly," and they flew into the air. "Come down at once," said Mrs. Gregg. "You're much too high." But before she could say another word, Philip and William had flown right out of the window.